Olá, estamos no terceiro dia do Festival Literário Internacional de Parati. E as ruas do Centro Histórico estão recheadas de poesia, cultura, literatura, para você que está interessado nesse tipo de atividade. Ao meu lado está o Benjamin Zephaniah. Ele é inglês, nasceu em Birmingham, no Reino Unido, mas tem origens jamaicanas. Ele faz um pouco de tudo. Ele é autor de poesia infantil, romancista, performer de dub, DJ de reggae, dramaturgo, apresentador de TV e rádio, ativista político e, nas horas vagas, mestre em artes marciais. Ele foi preso por roubo antes de voltar à música e à poesia e utiliza o seu trabalho para denunciar as injustiças raciais e sociais da Grã-Bretanha moderna. Confira a entrevista. Hello Benjamin, it's a pleasure to have you with us here in Brazil. Is your first time coming to Brazil?
My very first time. I've done little travelling in South America generally, and Brazil is just one of those places I've always wanted to go to. I must say I've only been here for a couple of days, so it's difficult to really judge a country on a couple of days, but when I arrived here I realised how little I really know about the place. I see images of Brazilian women dancing in the carnival and obviously the football and capoeira, and that's about it really. Unless something bad happens in the media, we don't see many other things.
How old are you when you started your work with literature, poetry?
Well, there's two different answers to that question, because I started my work in poetry before I started my work in literature. I started performing poetry. My first performance was at the age of 11. I started creating poetry, my mother said, at the age of 5. As soon as I started to use words, I started to use them creatively. It wasn't until I was 21 years old that I started to actually write poetry down. And now I'm very old, I'm 48.
Oh, it's not so old. No, you are not old.
I'm very old. 2 years time I'm 50, in 12 years time I'm 60. But for me, poetry has always been a part of my life, you know, and writing it down was something that came later. Because I come out of the oral tradition, and I create a poem, I don't automatically think of the poem in a book, I think of it in performance.
I mean, you make a bit of everything. You are a poet, you are a Rastafari, you are a DJ, you are a novelist. How do you move between these languages?
I find it quite easy on the whole. I mean, I tend to think of myself just as a creative being, and whatever is necessary to express this emotion or this feeling, that's what I will use. For me, it's like going into a kitchen, you know, and depending on what food you want to make, what the end result is, that will depend on your ingredients. If I want to say something which is a very big subject, and I want to make it really small and understandable for everybody, then I'll put it in a poem. If I want to take something that's really small and I want to really talk about it and get underneath it, then it'll be a novel. You know, if I want to take something which is only a few words but it wants to express an emotion that we all feel, it may be a music. You know, it really all depends. And I'm really lucky like that, you know. Most artists, they're stuck in one area, or two at the most. I mean, I think regularly I do about 8 things.
Right.
Even right now, if you go to London, you'll see I have a photograph exhibition, you know,
really?
in the National Portrait Gallery. So, a little bit of everything. It helps me.
Are you Rastafari?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, here in Brazil we don't have many Rastafaris outside the music scene. In the UK, is it common to have Rastafari in other professions?
Yes, of course. And actually, right now, because reggae is not as big as it used to be, most Rastas are not involved in reggae. Most Rastas, a lot of them actually are involved in community, charity work, things like this, where they just have normal jobs. Now we have a Rastafarian who is a brain surgeon. People always think of Rastafarians as people who live just in the ghetto. This is not true. I mean, there are a couple of things, 3 things I would say that hold Rastas, what make Rastas Rastas, and then we go left, right, and we go all kinds of ways politically, and we work in all different areas socially.
What defines to be a Rastafari?
3 things really. One is the acknowledgement that Africa is our homeland, and I think that's fact for Africans in Brazil or the United States or Great Britain. The second is the acknowledgement of this great man we call Marcus Garvey. He was the founder of Pan-Africanism, And lots of Rastas, like myself, kind of see him as a modern-day prophet. He was around in the 1930s. And the other thing is the acknowledgement of Haile Selassie. Some people think of him as a living God. Some people think of him just as a prophet. But the acknowledgement that Haile Selassie came from the family of Solomon, of King David, and therefore of Moses. That is about it. Those are the three things that all Rastas hold in common all over the world. But after that, they can be very left-wing, very right-wing, very religious, very political. I mean, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't mean they're not Rastas.
Perfect. Okay, tell me just a little bit about your book, Gangster Rap, that was launched in Brazil this year.
Well, it's a book about three young people who are not getting on very well at school. They could be thrown out of school and just left on the streets. But actually, the head teacher, actually the one who threw them out of school, realized that these boys are quite talented, so how can I use their talent? So he gave them a project, a music project. Actually, I've talked to many people in Brazil here who are running music projects for young people to kind of get them, keep them creative and use their energy, and it's that kind of thing. And through this music project, they became like one of the greatest bands in England, in Britain. But then they go to war with another band on the other side of London, East Coast, West Coast kind of rivalry. And so you have this gang war again, something which is, I understand, familiar in Brazil, gang war. But actually, at the end of the novel, you realize that although they are having fighting, they're going to gang wars, there is somebody higher up who is manipulating them, who is encouraging both sides to fight. So it's a book about hip-hop culture, but about how young people can be manipulated within hip-hop culture.
Great. Just to finish our interview, I'd like to know if there are different reactions of the public, of your public, in the role. If you have noticed that, and what would be the best public?
The best public will probably be certain parts of Africa and some parts of Asia where the oral tradition is alive. The difference is, I think, a very simple test really. When you go to some people, you meet somebody in the street and say, I'm a poet. Some people's reaction is to say, oh, what have you had published? That's one reaction. The other reaction is, hello, I'm a poet. Okay, show me, do one. And it's in those countries where they say do one, where they expect you to actually be living as a poet, not just a poet in the book with the publisher. Those are the countries I like, where the oral tradition is alive. So they tend to be African and Asian countries. But even here in Brazil, I know that there is an oral tradition, many oral traditions. Many of them are dying out now, but there are areas where some people are trying to keep these traditions alive.
Great. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your presence here in Brazil, for you contribute to the new generations and try to see this aspect of the poetry, like fighting against discrimination and social injustices.
Well, it's my pleasure. I think sometimes people use this word globalization and they think of it negatively. They think about globalization as something from big business. But we creative people, we are trying to have cultural, intellectual intercourse all over the world, and so it's a pleasure really being here and having this engagement.
I hope I can see you in Brazil in the near future. You are very welcome to here. Many people in Flip liked a lot of your presence and enjoyed your work. And many thanks, Benjamin.
Thank you. I'll be back.